there had been some kind of controversy with one particular minigame, the stripper minigame. So I'd like you to walk us through that a little bit.
Well, if you're playing GTA 5, go to the strip club and you can get a private lap dance from one of the dancers, and it's really explicit.
Yes, I have seen those boobs.
Yep, topless video game boobs, topless exposed video game nipples, and it's not next-gen boobs, it's,
They're very much current-gen boobs.
Yeah, but pushing current-gen to its limits. I mean, you can hear your PlayStation 3 like coughing and sputtering, making sure those breasts are as rendered as possible. But if you go into a private dance, and you can get one or two girls at the same time, there's a bodyguard that goes in and out of view. When the bodyguard's out of view, you can grope and touch them. So it shows, it's all first person, so it shows your arms kind of going in front and holding on their hips or rubbing their legs. And there's a meter that builds. And as the meter goes up, the stripper likes you more. And if you fill the meter up, she's like, hey, why don't we go home after this? And so you get to go home and, have a private naked show. And then she becomes one of your possible girlfriends. When I first played that, I was actually kind of slightly horrified by it. I was like, that seems a little sexual assaulty. I was worried. So what I did was I talked to an actual stripper.
Right.
It turns out that that actually is like a real thing. Like I thought Rockstar was just sort of making this horrible game out of like this job, but it turns out strippers allow a lot more touching than you would. Clearly I hang out in strip clubs all the time.
Yeah, me too.
I know that.
We are experts.
It was an interesting thing that it really changed my perspective. Like I came out of it being like, I'm gonna be outraged, and then talking to this woman for about an hour, I decided that in fact I'm much more comfortable with it. Turns out that it's very much a negotiation between the stripper and the client. Basically, more money, I can make the dance hotter, which means closer. There's obviously an expectation that if the stripper says stop, the guy has to stop, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so at that point, my only problem with the strip club minigame became maybe they actually have male strippers for like women.
Yeah. No. So what is your overall impression, though, of the stripper minigame and how women are portrayed in the game?
Well, I think that, the hardest thing about a GTA game is they're awful people. So you have to start from the premise that you are playing a game about the most terrible people. They're criminals, they're murderers, in many cases. I mean, like one of the main characters of Grand Theft Auto 5 is implied to be a serial killer.
Who could that be?
Yeah, and a cannibal.
It's awful, but you have to understand in the context, Trevor is an awful person and not your role model. And while you're playing as Trevor, you're not necessarily supposed to be like Trevor.
Exactly.
So there's that narrative disconnect there that some people forget about sometimes.
Exactly. As long as you start from the premise that these are terrible people anyway, then you kind of feel like the best comparison would be like Quentin Tarantino, who gets a lot of criticism for dropping N-bombs left and right in his movies.
But it's hard to argue that he's actually like a hateful racist.
Exactly. He's writing to these characters that he writes. He's giving them dialogue that feels right for them, which is why it never feels gratuitous. Or if it is gratuitous, the gratuity serves a point. Like in Django Unchained, he was really trying hard to emphasize just how awful an institution slavery was. And
it makes you really uncomfortable, but it's supposed to make you really uncomfortable.
Exactly. And even when it's funny, it's really disconcerting. And I feel like there's a little bit of that going on with like the way the characters are so sexist and mean-spirited in a GTA game. That's the kind of people they would be. I just wish that the women were portrayed is equally as terrible. Like when they're being awful people separate from the fact that, they have female qualities. Maybe have a female cannibal in there. Or
why couldn't Trevor be a lady? No. Well, you can't tell them to like, this character should be a woman just for the sake of being a woman.
They got to tell the story they're going to tell.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like, buff up, put as much effort into writing your female characters that you put into the outline of Trevor's balls. And no, seriously, if you take Trevor.
I haven't seen that yet.
If you take Trevor and go to like the discount store in the game, you can buy these like really tight suits, and they actually give you the heft and outline of Trevor's junk.
Wow.
And it's, two cantaloupes.
Ew, wow, okay.
Maybe ostrich eggs, maybe not cantaloupe sized.
So,
he doesn't have the mumps.
Oh, okay, that's a lot. So in the context of the game, it actually isn't as offensive or as bad as maybe it has been portrayed or called out on.
I think ultimately that's where I shook up.
Okay.
It's not like you're portrayed as like molesting the strippers. You're giving them
They're
money.
willing participants in this.
Exactly. You're giving them money and they like you and then they ask you to go home. And it's unlikely to be the experience of 99% of people who go to strip clubs because they're not going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to shower the strippers with. Just FYI, kids, you're probably not going to get to touch the stripper. But yeah, I know. It's disappointing. But it happens a lot more than we think. So
interesting. That's very interesting from that perspective.